In the village of Aloan, nestled at the base of jagged cliffs, there was a tale that every child grew up hearing. It was a legend of the Whispering Caves, an ancient cavern system said to stretch for miles beneath the mountains. The villagers claimed that every sound inside the caves did not return as a simple echo, but as voices of the long dead, of forgotten wanderers, and sometimes of people who were still alive but far away. Generations had avoided the caves. Farmers would not pasture their flocks near the cliff shadow, and woodcutters refused to collect timber from the forest that skirted the entrance. They said the voices could tempt a man, could whisper secrets that were not meant for mortal ears. But for Elias, a young historian drawn forgotten stories, the caves were irresistible. He had discovered fragments of ancient parchment in the archives of the old monastery, all hinting that the caves were not merely natural formations, but once a sanctuary for an ancient order of seers. These seers, the scrolls claimed, could hear the voices of the past, present, and even the future within the cave's depths. Elias felt a pull, almost magnetic, toward the Whispering Caves. He could not rest until he uncovered their secrets. Elias set out one misty morning, armed with nothing but a lantern, a leather-bound journal, and a satchel of bread and dried meat. The villagers watched him go with silent, uneasy stares. An old woman muttered a warning. The caves remember every soul that enters. Be sure they do not remember yours. The path twisted upward through pine forests and jagged stone until at last Elias stood before the mouth of the cave. The air was unnaturally still. No bird sang, no insect buzzed. Only the sound of his own breath echoed faintly from within. The entrance yawned like the maw of some ancient beast, framed by jagged teeth of stone. Carvings half eroded by centuries lined the rock face, symbols Elias recognized from the monastery scrolls. Spirals, eyes, and glyphs that spoke of memory made eternal. With one last glance at the sky, Elias stepped inside. At first, it was silence. His lantern light flickered against walls of damp stone. Drops of water fell with hollow plinks into unseen pools. Elias noted the cave's strange acoustics. Every sound carried further than expected, twisting and warping. Then came the first whisper. It was his own voice. He had spoken aloud, muttering to himself about the carvings, and the echo returned not as repetition, but as words he had not spoken. You should not be here. Elias froze. His breath quickened. Again, the cave spoke, this time in a man's voice he did not know. The past is not dead. It waits. He pressed deeper. The whispers grew stronger, layering over each other. Voices of soldiers crying out in battle, a woman weeping, a child laughing, a chant of monks in some forgotten tongue. And then, clear as crystal, his mother's voice, though she had been dead for 10 years. Elias, turn back, my son. Tears stung his eyes, but his resolve hardened. The caves were more than legend. They were a vessel of memory, a place where time itself spoke. Hours passed. Elias descended winding passages until he reached a vast chamber where the ceiling arched so high it vanished into darkness. Here the whispers became deafening, a storm of voices crashing over one another. He lit a second lantern and raised it. The chamber walls were etched with murals, battles, coronations, plagues, and births. Humanity's triumphs and tragedies carved in eternal stone. At the chamber's heart stood a monolith of black obsidian, polished so smooth it reflected like water. Upon touching it, the voices ceased. Silence fell heavy as a shroud. Then one single voice spoke, deep, resonant, and commanding. You seek knowledge, but knowledge has a price. The monolith rippled, showing him visions. Armies marching to wars long past, kings betraying their kin, and cities falling to ruin. He saw his own village, too, burned, abandoned, forgotten, and he saw himself, older, walking these caves alone, his lantern the only light. The cave demanded something. Elias felt in his bones. He was to give of himself, a memory offered in exchange for the truth. A voice whispered, what will you surrender? A joy? A sorrow? A name? The whispers became deafening, a storm of voices crashing over one another. He lit a second lantern and raised it. The chamber walls were etched with murals, battles, coronations, plagues, and births. Humanity's triumphs and tragedies carved in eternal stone. At the chamber's heart stood a monolith of black obsidian, polished so smooth it reflected like water. Upon touching it, the voices ceased. Silence fell heavy as a shroud. Then one single voice spoke, deep, resonant, and commanding. You seek knowledge, but knowledge has a price. The monolith rippled, showing him visions. Armies marching to wars long past, kings betraying their kin, and cities falling to ruin. He saw his own village, too, burned, abandoned, forgotten. And he saw himself, older, walking these caves alone, his lantern the only light. The cave demanded something. Elias felt it in his bones. He was a guild himself, a memory offered in exchange for the truth. A voice whispered, "What will you surrender? A joy? A sorrow? A name?" Elias wrestled with the choice. Memories were not mere thoughts. They were identity itself. Yet his thirst for truth outweighed his fear. "I give you my happiest day," he whispered. "The day my father lifted me to his shoulders and showed me the world as though it belonged to me." The chamber darkened. The memories slipped away like water from his grasp, leaving only a hollow ache. He could no longer recall his father's face. The cave accepted the offering. The monolith pulsed with light, and a hidden passage yawned open. Beyond the passage lay a cavern of unimaginable size, filled with crystal pillars that glowed with faint blue fire. Each crystal pulsed with whispers, as though each one imprisoned voices of the dead. At the center stood a figure cloaked in shadow, a keeper. His eyes glowed pale. His voice was the sound of 1,000 overlapping echoes. "All who enter become part of the chorus," the keeper intoned. "Some give willingly. Others we take." Elias trembled, yet he stood firm. Why do the caves exist? What is their purpose? The keeper raised a hand, and visions swirled in the crystals. Civilizations rising and falling, every triumph, every crime, every secret humanity had ever tried to bury. "The world forgets," the keeper said, "but we remember. We are the archive of all that ever was. When the world ends, we shall remain, a library of whispers eternal." Elias now understood. The caves were not haunted. They were memory incarnate. Every sound, every life, every secret lingered here forever. But with this knowledge came a terrible choice. "Stay," the keeper said, "and you shall become one with the voices, an eternal witness. Leave, and you may carry fragments of truth to your world, but your life will never be the same." Elias stood at the threshold of eternity. To stay was to surrender his flesh, his will, his very name, and dissolve into the chorus of forgotten souls. To leave was to live, but with a mind burdened by truths no mortal should carry. He chose to leave. As he walked back through the twisting passages, the voices whispered to him. Not warnings, but fragments of history, secrets of kings and prophecies yet to come. His lantern flickered, and the cave seemed to sigh as he stepped into daylight. The villagers gasped when he returned, for though only a night had passed outside, Elias's hair had turned silver as moonlight, and his eyes carried the weight of centuries. The whispering caves had let him go, but they would never let him forget.